All right, Ben, you see what I'm wearing right here? This is a Pack Your Knives shirt.
Yeah.
Ben is a super fan. I don't know you know about this.
Oh,
Amin.
really?
He's a Top
nice.
Chef legendary super fan, this guy.
Yeah. I'm looking forward to the new season.
Now, Ben, as a stats wonk yourself, do you appreciate the advanced analytics on Pack Your Knives, or do you find it hokey and actually distracting from the overall narrative of the show?
I think the only issue with the more data is always good. Not nearly enough data to do really, really interesting stuff. But that's just it's so context dependent, the performances. But it's fun to see what we can learn.
Tom, I want to derail for a second. Hold on. Ben, in a perfect world where you had unlimited measurables, what would you want to be a measurable on Pack Your Knives so that you could crunch some extra analysis?
I'd want actual scores from the judges.
Really?
Because right now we just have like
competition. Like, you don't know how close these things are, how much better they are than their competition, what the overall level of competition. Like, comparing season to season, like, is Peak Boutillo the best ever? I don't know. I haven't tasted the food. I don't have a good insight into that.
Yeah, I mean, it's like ranking draft classes. Like, every year is a new draft class, but they're never playing against each other, so you can't really know how good they are. But Ben, I've got great news. We've got this great, data scientist, data guru, Carly Levitz, who is now contributing to Pack Your Knives. You should go packyourknives.com, subscribe already, and you get access to all our past episodes and our amazing data visuals that she's doing. She just did a data wrapper statistical database of all of the winners. She created her own stats of, like, she tracked top 3, bottom 3, number of quickfire wins, percentage of quickfire wins. So we're creating our own Top Chef reference, is what I'm trying to say, at packyourknives.com. The new season on Thursday night.
Tom, this reminds me of what we did when you did the refs ranking. Like, we don't know how the league classifies their refs, who's good and who's not, like, as far as the way they score them. We do know that the highest honor a ref can be is the crew chief, and the lowest honor is the umpire. And so, based on how many games you performed in each position, we can come up with a rough estimate of who the best referees are according to the NBA. So that's what you guys just did right there.
Yeah, isn't it kind of like coaches, where you don't know who the coaches value, but you also can see, like, who they play the most, and so therefore you know that they really trust this guy at the end of games, Ben, right? Like, you can kind of retroactively quantify the unquantifiable, right?
Well, we can try, and certainly, like, with Pack Your Knives, while they mostly don't play against each other, some of them do. Like, there is some repeat over seasons, and the All-Star seasons, provide an opportunity to try and translate some of that. But you sort of have to make some assumptions to do that. But it's a cool idea, fun stuff.
Yeah. Also, fun stuff is having you on, Ben. We used to work together with Amin at ESPN. You were the director of analytics. You've been a forefather. I think Dean Oliver, who you co-wrote this paper with, he might be like the godfather.
Yeah. He's the Hall
would you
of Famer.
say? He's the Hall of Famer.
He needs to be in the Basketball Hall of Fame legitimately.
Oh, I love this. Let's start the campaign right here.
I tried to do it last year at Sloane on my panel there, but didn't really pick up any steam. But if we can get it going, let's do it.
My intro to basketball analytics. The first time I was ever even conceived of just possession-based stats or just anything beyond per 48 was basketball on paper. The guy I worked for at the Knicks said, read this. He gave me the book. It didn't even have a cover. It was like, I guess it was hand-me-down after hand-me-down. So it was a hard cover that it was missing the jacket. And I read it, and I'll never forget, because we were talking about the 04-05 Phoenix Suns. And I was saying, well, they're a terrible defense. And my boss, a guy named Matt Simon, was like, well, are they a terrible defense because they allow 110 points per game or whatever it was? Or is it just that they play so fast that, of course, they're going to be more points? And then if we see how many points are scored by possession every trip, then that gives us a more accurate depict. And it wasn't elite, but it definitely wasn't worse than the league.
Yep.
And that was the beginning of everything for me as far as understanding basketball on a different level.
Yeah, it's the beginning for a lot of folks, that book. And then he's got a new book, Beyond Basketball on Paper, which is also an excellent resource.
What's your first meeting of Dean Oliver like? Like, what is your origin story with Dean?
So I was working at a startup company called Pro Trade Sports, which eventually got acquired by Yahoo. I think he was living in the Bay Area. I was living in San Francisco at the time, and I had read his book, and we just, I had written something on our website, I think, about the Portland, about the draft that coming year, and he called. We got in contact, and we met downtown San Francisco and hung out, had coffee. And this is like 20 plus years ago now, because we're old, yeah, so that was the beginning, and we built ESPN's QBR together, but this is the first work we've been able to do together since then. So,
wow.
So you guys invented QBR. We have a god amongst us here. Wow.
Yeah, I mean, Dean. When Dean started, he was the first director of sports analytics at ESPN, and they started building QBR, and he asked me to come consult and help them build parts of it, and so. Yeah, he was the first one. Then he hired me to be. I was hired officially to be the associate director of sports analytics then at ESPN, but he also quit and left to go to the Kings the week I started there, and so I got an instant promotion. It was great.
That's how you do it, right, Abid? That's how you do it.
Right into it.
You bring someone in and say, you know what, I've saved a seat for you. Yeah. I'm out of here.
Yep.
That was my plan for like 6 years in Phoenix. One of these days, someone's going to quit, and then I'll slide right in.
So you said, Ben, that you have been working on and off with Dean Oliver for the last 20 years. That means you guys have a lot of chemistry together, which is kind of ironic because this is the paper you guys wrote together and presented at the Sloane Conference. And Amin and I were not present for that. But we want to share the insights with the masses, the illumination out there who look at intangibles and say, we can never quantify that stuff. It's just these innate things that we just know to be true. And chemistry seems to be one of those things, these inanimate objects in the ether that we always feel like you have chemistry with another teammate or with a colleague. You can't quite put your finger on it or quantify it. And this paper called Lessons in Chemistry, Impact of Teammate Familiarity on Shooting in the NBA is, I think, the closest distillation that I have read of what chemistry is and how to accrue it and why it kind of builds over time. And so, Ben, to recap quickly, what you found was basically you looked at catch and shoot pairings in the NBA. You have 900,000 data points, and you found that over time, as you increase the number of volume or opportunities, you see a pretty substantial effect of those shots are going in more, and whether those are better passes or whether higher quality shots, or even they're making those shots more than what you would expect. Outperforming. All of this seems to be happening in ways that I haven't seen quantified before. So, Ben, to kick things off, how did you come up with this study? What is the origin story of the study?
Yeah, so I reached out to Dean about a year ago and said, look, we should work on something together. It's been a while, and so we tossed around a bunch of ideas. And he had noticed, and he talks a little bit about it in his new book, Basketball Beyond Paper, how one is it's sort of well known that offensive rating sort of increases throughout the season, and then he had drilled down a little bit more and looked at, say, just in general, catch and shoot opportunities become more efficient throughout the season, and so he had sort of noticed this trend, and he's like, we might be worth sort of investigating what is causing this. And so we talked a little about what that would mean. And, basically the concept is, when a player joins a new team, it takes a little while to learn your teammates. It takes a little time to get comfortable, to know how you fit into the offense, where to be to take a shot, where your teammate likes a pass to arrive in the right place, to have the smooth shooting motion that they prefer, to be really comfortable. It takes time to work that all out. And so we drilled in, and we're fortunate to get a large data set from the NBA to look at every single, and we looked, started with every single shot that was the result of a pass in the NBA since 2016. And we did all the analysis on that entire set. There are the same trends exist in basically all shot types. Catch and shoot is where it's the most pronounced, which makes sense because that's where it is most immediate. And the rhythm and everything and the spacing of it all, it seems, in theoretically at least, is most important to get just right and be able to fine tune. So that's sort of how we started, and then we dug into the data and sort of saw a couple of these examples where this plays out just in general. When you look at Chris Paul joining the Suns, their first 50 catch and shoot attempts that Chris Paul dished out to the top shooters there were bad from a points per attempt perspective.
0.8. So it's like a 40% 2-pointer, right?
It's terrible. Then they, from shot opportunities 50 to 100, they bump up to okay at 0.93, and then opportunities 200 to 250, they're at 1.23 points per attempt, which is really, really good. And that's, that team was really, humming offensively towards the end of that season. So that was all sort of inspired. And then we went in and started to model it out, create the models we needed, statistical models to do this, both to understand the overall trend and then try and understand what was creating this, where the learning was happening between these teammates.
Ben, how much of it, because obviously it's quantifiable. You guys know what the coefficients are, so to speak. How much of your findings did you find was attributed to improved shot quality versus outperforming the expected performance on a particular shot?
Yeah. So basically, if you take the first 50 shots, catch and shoot opportunities, you can see that players overall improve the results improve about 14%. They go up 14%. And so when we break that down, we look at, as you said, we looked at shot quality versus shot accuracy, those two components. And it seems it's roughly evenly split between those two things. So, half of those gains is because players are finding better shots, and we can see that, part of that is the passer is more open when they're making the pass, so they're have more confidence to pass earlier, essentially. And then the shooter tends to be more open in these situations. Over time, they're finding the better spot on the floor. And when you just look at the 2-point shots, they're actually taking shorter ones. So all that comes into improved shot quality over time as you get in through those first 50 opportunities. The rest is accuracy. So another 7% over those first 50 opportunities is just better, making the shots more often. And we love to get the pose recognition data because we think that if we were able to drill into the pose recognition data they have now in the NBA, we'd be able to really understand why that's happening. I mean, we have theories
that's
about
Hawkeye. You're talking pose recognition
data, exactly. Mm-hmm. We have a lot of theories about why that's happening from an accuracy standpoint, but I think the Hawkeye data could go a long way in helping us really say, yes, it is that because the ball is hitting, in the sweet spot more often, that kind of thing that would allow, that kind of analysis. But at least from a shot quality perspective, we have a pretty good handle on why this is happening.
If Luka Doncic is already doing behind the back no look passes right in the pocket for Austin Reeves, like what? Yeah. What are we expecting here from Luka Doncic going forward? Because he just found these teammates, and it seems like he already has crazy chemistry with them.
Well, I mean, from a Luka passing perspective, yeah. I mean, like he's hitting LeBron on those deep throws and all that stuff. That's great, but he himself is not shooting very well, right? If we looked at all the so far this season, there were 72. Kyrie Irving set up 72 Luka Doncic catch and shoots, and on those, Luka has an effective field goal percentage of almost 54%. LeBron has set up Luka 9 times, and on those shots, he's shooting 33% effective field goal percentage. So, seems like Luka's got some once he gets a little more comfortable, gets a little more, few more reps in. Now without LeBron there, they're not going to be able to get those reps in at this time. But when he does, like their offense efficiency's got there's room to grow there if they can capture some of that.
Did you find any evidence of negative chemistry?
So this was interesting. We did all of this is in the paper we present all the general analysis, the general results. And we were digging into the next question obviously is exactly what you're talking about. Like, what are the player specific things? Are there some players that have instant chemistry, all this kind of stuff? And there were a couple of players that were identified to have, to go down the points per attempt, but the sample size is so small, we don't really have the confidence that that's correct. It sort of seem really weird that, when Jokic is passing you the ball, that over time you actually get worse at shooting. Right. Like that doesn't and so because the way you have so few partners as a shooter, so few passing partners where you actually accumulate 50, 100 catch and shoot attempts in one season, it's really hard to, at this point in our analysis, to say we feel really good about those player specific impact. But, there is something there at some point. And, I guess theoretically you could have a negative chemistry and it gets worse. But we're not quite at that stage yet.
Is this something where you'd advise the Warriors? Yeah, take that, get that extension for Jimmy Butler because you're going to reap the benefits of the chemistry in year 2 rather than year 1.
Well, you do. It's interesting. So the season effect is, basically you do at the end of the season. If you've had say 200 attempts, catch shoot attempts, you're about 11%. Sorry, about 20% better than you were at the beginning of the season. So, wow. There's, but then you basically you drop off. Then at the beginning, you reset a little bit at the beginning of the next season. So to about 10% of where you were, above where you were when you very first started. So there's some summer learning loss for those parents out there with their kids. You get some of that going on. But then you improve, and your top end after the second season is better than the top end after the first season. So there are definitely gains for players to play multiple seasons together. The magnitude of it is such that there aren't a lot of transactions that you necessarily want to make based on the fact that these guys are going to develop more chemistry and get better. But at the margin, it certainly is there, and it's certainly for some of these players who are maybe not the top end talent that they really getting them comfortable and getting more and more reps, getting their reps to a certain level. Like there will be value to that. So your 6-7 guys off the bench, like that's where I think instead of churning those guys, keeping them a little more roster stability at that end is will give you that marginal advantage that you're looking for.
I mean, how about this stat? Real quick, how about this stat here? Buddy Hield passing to Stephen Curry on 3-pointers. Steph Curry is shooting 33% on threes from Buddy Hield, 18 of 54. But when he's getting the pass from Draymond Green, it's 42% on threes. Kevon Looney, 47%. Andrew Wiggins, 47%. Which one of those is a newcomer this year to giving the ball to Steph Curry? It's Buddy Hield, who's Steph Curry is shooting 33% on threes on passes from Buddy Hield. That's wild.
Yeah. Buddy Hield.
I mean, the players, if you do, then you don't. Tough, because of that. But yeah, you do see some really interesting stories when you start digging into this stuff.
Ben, when you think about the improvement, right? Mm-hmm. Is there a plateau? Is there a number of reps or samples where, the marginal improvement has basically diminished and now it's just a flat line or a very small incremental uptick?
So we see, there's certainly the first 50 shot attempts where you see the biggest gain. Like that's, first 50 all time, and then at the beginning of each season, that's where you see the biggest ramp up. And then it does plateau a little bit, but it never sort of hits a maximum. And particularly, given that the last season, the top combination, Tyrese Halliburton and Miles Turner, That was 237 attempts. So you're not getting to a place where you're taking 1,000 attempts in one season. Right. If you got there, then yeah, maybe there's some theoretical max. I would guess if there's a theoretical max, Draymond to Steph Curry is probably at the theoretical max. But for most combinations, there's room to grow each season.
Do you think we can quantify chemistry in other ways?
I think that you have to define exactly what you're talking about, because chemistry is such a broad word. Like, you can think about it in lots and lots of different ways. And that's why we are very specific. Like, we're going to quantify one piece of what can be under the umbrella of chemistry. We're going to talk about teammates learning to play together better. And then very specifically, catch and shoot. Like that's drill down. But yes, anything you can define as a thing within that umbrella of chemistry, it can be quantified. Whether we have all the data we want to measure really precisely right now or not, that's a separate question. But there's no reason, if it's something that you could see and would have an impact on the court, there's no reason why it couldn't be measured.
I used to define chemistry as, if you think about it like arithmetic, 1 + 1 = 2. But on some teams, the Warriors, for instance, when they were really doing their thing, 1 + 1 doesn't equal 2. 1 + 1 can equal 3 or even 4, even 5. It's like because they all know what they're doing, it reinforces in the system and it grows. And then other teams, 1 + 1 = 1 because it's just a series of people all doing their things disjointed. And even though you say, all of these great talents, they don't really mesh. So from that standpoint, I guess the next place where my mind would wander would be, could you quantify chemistry on the defensive end? And what would be the tools you would use / what would be the tools that you wish you could use, or the stats you wish you could use but you can't because you just don't have them?
Yeah, so I think it's just like how you're thinking about the offensive side. On the defensive side, what we need is really, really good measurements but how well players defend in different situations. How good are they overall and defensively? In every aspect. So you can then on the offensive side, this guy scores 10 points per 100. This guy is 20, and add them up 30. No, they're scoring 40. Oh, they got great chemistry. Mm-hmm. We want similar kinds of metrics and things on the defensive side. Now, in both those situations, there's also this idea of what coaching and scheme has to do with this, which is separate from chemistry, but sort of intertwined with it. So it's all very to get to a place where it's a truly general measure of what do these guys playing together create versus just adding up their skill sets, what we would expect guys of their skill sets to be able to produce. That's the calculation that you're trying to make. Once you define the skill sets really, really well, and you have really, a lot of confidence in what those look like, and you've been able to remove scheme effectively from this, then you can have sort of a general notion of chemistry by this definition.
Yeah. Amin's going to love this question. I still believe that the noise meters at games are accurate. Okay. So I've always believed. Okay.
Decibels.
The decibels are real. It seems like it's an accurate portrayal. Why would they juice the stats? Mm-hmm. I kind of feel like that would be a good measurable for defenders or communication, is like Draymond Green talks a lot defensively and choreographs the defense and is a conductor out there and really communicates to his teammates. I kind of feel like a noise meter would measure some kind of intangibles that when coaches say they want this guy to be talking more defensively. And sometimes there's bad talking, like yelling at each other's teammates, like, hey, you should be over there. What the hell are you doing? But those are certain like intangibles, quote unquote, but then they become tangible if we have the right measuring tools. You know what I'm saying? Is like some of these intangibles that we ascribe as being like, oh, he just has this connective tissue, or he has this amazing impact on team defense and chemistry. And really, I feel like there isn't like a holy grail of chemistry that, like, honestly, I feel like we can measure quite a bit more than we're doing right now.
Oh, 100% we could measure more than we're doing right now. And I think that, with the sort of the Draymond example, like if you've measured all the skill sets and abilities and players' abilities to react to situations and things, in theory, you could say, all right, I'm going to simulate out these defensive possessions and I'm going to remove Draymond from it. And I'm going to put in a player who's similar skill set, but not, doesn't do the things we haven't put in the skill set. And see what happens if the rest of the team really reacts the same way. Now, at this point, we're not in a place to do that. But we can take, subsets of things that we think about as chemistry and say, all right, I'm going to define this and I'm going to measure this very specific thing, like we've done with these learning curves, and say, and try and get at whether they matter, whether they have impact on the game, as however you define them. Because the truth is, like, you ask 100 coaches to define team chemistry, you're going to get 1,000 different definitions. So, like, there's no agreed definition of this stuff, but we can say, all right, well, familiarity and team, guys learn to work together. We agree that's something that might be important. Let's measure it. Okay, here it's measured. Seems like it matters in certain situations, both from a coaching and a team roster construction perspective. So we've learned that. Now, what are the other things? What are the next sets of things that we want to look at? And that's sort of my approach, as opposed to trying to solve it all in one big metric that people are going to challenge the definitions repeatedly on.
Go ahead.
I was going to say, what are those next things that you want to work on?
So I would definitely want to get to these down to player level metrics. So, like, is James Harden a true Swiss Army knife that you can drop in any team, or Kevin Durant? Are they like that, or do they have quicker learning curves, or do they take time? And then are there teams or coaches that create better chemistry? Like, I think those are interesting, sort of dimensions to this that we can look at, and just sort of keeping down this vein of, teammates playing together. We can take it out as shooting. We can look at pick and roll combinations and see how effective do they get more effective as they work together more often, as the results change, and different play types. And then, ideally, defensively, we can do the same thing on pick and rolls. Like, when teammates have to work together defending a pick and roll, how long does it take for them to get really good at this, if they can? So, those are some of the, that sort of, we have the data to understand when players have to work together, and look at the outcomes. And those are the pieces we can really dig into at this point.
Ben, what was the most surprising thing you learned from doing this?
I think the most surprising is that it turned out that seems like it's about equally, the shot selection and the shot accuracy pieces seem to be roughly the same amount of impact. That there's a nice symmetry to that, but there's no reason why that should have come out that way. But the curves really look very, very similar. And it's nice to be able to see, like, why that shot selection piece is happening. And then, the shot accuracy stuff, as we get, as I said before, as we get the data there to understand that. But, you really see the passer is passing earlier before they're under pressure, more frequently as they learn to work with their teammates. Like, these are things that, there's that small impact, but it's a real thing, that is changing. Players are changing their behavior.
I think about the lack of chemistry in the NBA as a function of two things. The turnover is just, there's more trades or free agency switching, roster turnover, but also injuries where, the Philadelphia 76ers just acquired Paul George and they can't get him on the floor together. And on one hand, you're like, hey, they just got to play out the string here. They got to get these guys on the floor together, and then you'll see the chemistry effects, and that Paul George and Tyrese Maxey and Kelly Oubre and Joel Embiid are going to be great together, just need to get more reps together. But on the other hand, it's like, I mean, they might never get that because they just might not be on the floor together. So this presents a problem for GMs where it's like, it's not enough to get these guys together and just say, hey, in year 2, we're going to really take a jump. I feel like you're not even, for a lot of these teams, they're not even going to get those chemistry effects because there's just so much turnover in the league.
Yeah, and I think the injuries are, particularly for the Sixers, obviously a really significant piece. And their decision is less like, can these guys get better? It's like, can these guys actually play together? Like, we don't know what that's going to look like ever. Like, are they ever going to get 200 reps between them? Like, it seems like it's hard for them to do that. But some of these other teams where like you mentioned, the LeBron's out for right now, like, seems reasonable to think that when he comes back and they get those reps up, Luka's shooting is going to get back to where it was when he was with Dallas, and they'll see some increased improvement, at least on the offensive end, when that happens.
Ben, I want to ask you a question that's a little bit removed from this, but you're one of the smart people, so I'm going to ask you this question. So the offense obviously has exploded in the NBA over the last, whatever you want to call it, 20 years, 15 years. But specifically since COVID, the team offenses are off the chart to the point where of the top 40 team offenses in the history of the NBA, 39 of them have happened since COVID, basically since 2020. That one holdout is the 2019-2020 Dallas Mavericks at 35. So technically they started before COVID and ended up.
Was Luka on that team? Okay. Yeah.
But I'm always staggered by every time I check this, I update it, I look. And I remember when I worked for the Suns in 2010, we finished that season with the 4th highest offensive rating in NBA history. And now we're not even in the top 50.
Yep.
And all of them have happened, or excuse me, almost all of them have happened since COVID. I mean, think about that. Even like the Kevin Durant, Steph Curry Warriors, not good enough compared to take a random team from 2021 or 2020, like the Atlanta Hawks last year are better than that team offensively. It can't just be because everyone's shooting more threes. Is there anything more to it that I'm missing?
I mean, I think, I think you can see the rate of threes continues to go up. I mean, we have teams shooting like 50% of their shots are threes now. Like it's, that does have a real effect. And that was a trend that's, been building over the last 10, 15 years, and that's a big piece of this. I think the way they ref the game is obviously changed, and so it's easier to get to the foul line, and so you're seeing that impact as well.
So spacing, and it's not necessarily the 3-point shooting. It's just that there's just so much more open space, in my opinion.
Yeah, and as teams are they're, to Tom's point, they're the synergies of taking a lot of 3-point shots are creating things, and then you have players now like Wemby who's coming in, and if your center isn't 7'2" and shooting threes, like what are you doing? Like this, it's a different world than it was even 5 years ago when Bam was like going to be the next great center in the league, but now he's limited and. Because he's not the shooter that some of these other guys are.
Ben, before I let you go, I want to know, you've worked for NBA teams before, NFL teams. Who's the most analytically curious player like that you've come across that you were like, man, this guy loves this stuff, or asked me the right questions that you didn't expect?
Yeah. So, I didn't work a ton with players, but I'll borrow from Dean, we were asked this question at Sloane, and he talked about KP when he was in Washington was somebody he really worked closely with, somebody who from the beginning said, I don't need the numbers, but like as they start to see them and start to use them, like oh, this is really valuable, and start to really get into it. But also in general, like the things that a variety of folks around the league have said is not new, is like the younger players are way more open to this stuff. They grew up in the world of efficiency. Like they understand that, and like it's not different to them. So they're way more interested in hearing that. Now there's players that don't want to, some things they just don't want to know because they don't want to get it in their head. And that's fine. Like, not every player has to be a master of all this stuff. That's what your coaches are for. I think it's, there are certainly players, Shane Battier famously is very interested in this stuff, that find value in it in the right ways, and it's presenting it in the right way that those players can engage with. That's the art of this thing.
I wonder if video games have made it so that these kids are more open to it, because there's so much quant in like NBA 2K.
Yeah, you see those shot probabilities, like, oh, okay, like you can see that it's much more real. It's like it's part of the normal way they engage. Like I talked to in one panel this weekend, like the term efficiency as a sports term on Google has grown about 1,000% in the last 20 years. Like just part of how we think about it when, again, 15, 20 years ago, never talked about the word efficiency. It wasn't the thing in sports. We talked about points per game, and that's what mattered. It's been a massive change in the language and how we look at these things. That's been amazing to see.
Well, I'm not surprised that Chris Paul is the face of your study. That Wake Forest education, of course.
There you go.
The guy who tried to hack the All-Star Skills Challenge by just throwing the ball off the rack instead of actually attempting a shot. That makes sense. Yes.
Like, if there's no rule against it, what are we doing?
This entire interview was just one big plug for Tom.
It was all set up.
Pack your knives.
I used to work at ESPN with Ben.
ESPN,
yes.
Yeah. Mentioned the Blazers in the draft.
Pack your knives podcast of the season. I'm really looking forward to it.
Yes, the next episode that you're on Illuminati, I can expect a higher insight per 36 minutes from Ben Alamar. Just the chemistry is going to be through the roof.
Do my best.
All right, Ben. Appreciate you coming on, and we'll have you on next time when you solve pick and roll defense chemistry and the like. So thanks, appreciate it, Ben.
All right, thanks for having me on, guys.